Mario has been a gaming icon for decades and has been in more games than can be counted. Although no year in recent memory has gone past without some sort of type of Mario game being released. Series fans will remember nearly the decade throughout the original Mario platformers. From 1997 to 2005, there were only a few new Mario platformers released: Super Mario Sunshine, and during the second part of this distraught, after Sunshine's release, the mysterious Super Mario 128 was the main focus of the fan base. No concentrated information was given on the game, and eventually series creator Shigeru Miyamoto claimed that it had simply been a series of test concepts that were never intended to be an actual game. The mystery faded from the memory as Mario fought the fan. It finally ended, and most people forgot about the game. And once it had been in the center of every Mario fan's imagination, the Mario drop corresponded with a bad era for Nintendo in terms of console sales. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube did not even have the financial success within the earlier Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo, or later the Wii. For a very proud company that relied solely on video games and to make money, this was quite upsetting for the higher-ranking employees that were attached to the company and felt that its success or failure reflected on them personally. Nintendo started working on a sequel to the 1996 Super Mario 64 shortly after the game was released, but during the late 1990s, it became clear that Nintendo's not winning the console war. The Super Mario 64 sequel then restarted from scratch, since the company believed that it was not sustainable enough through the improvement to the original turned on the tides of the market battle. Seeing it generally become more realistic and violent video games on Sony's PlayStation, the market leader, Nintendo, considered making a Mario that was closer to the tone to what the public seemed to be want. There were quite a bit of an internal conflict to how the ever goes too far as the new direction of the new Mario was clearly not to be ready until Nintendo's next console, the GameCube. There's the only hint that was released to the public was a comment by Miyamoto, as he thought that Mario and Luigi should act more like grown-ups in their games more often, soon to be released. GameCube, of course. The new Mario project was ultimately split into two games: Luigi's Mansion, which reflected on the darker tone, and many felt the series should turn, although it is still toned down quite a bit compared to what Super Nintendo exclusives and developers wanted. And the Super Mario Sunshine, which went to the complete opposite direction. Both were released within a year of the GameCube, and Nintendo felt more confident in their new systems, and Mario games would return to their former glory as the market leader. As those who were familiar with the gaming history know, they didn't. The GameCube was even worse in the market share than Nintendo 64, and it's the mass market's taste shifted, even more violent and realistic games. During this period, the second Get somber mode at Nintendo intensified, and the darker Mario project was revived. At this time, the code was renamed Super Mario 128. It wasn't clear exactly what happened, but at Nintendo during this period, as we all know, nothing called Super Mario 128 was ever released or publicly shown. The source that had revealed the internal strife at Nintendo during the later N64 era refused to discuss what was happening during the time period of GameCube's failure, but released the prototype of Super Mario 128 online that could be played on somehow the Wii homebrew channel. Following the recollection of my time playing it, the game was clearly an early beta, with the title screen was nothing but white text saying Super Mario 128 against the black background. There were no options or save file selection either. After the title screen, the game started, and Bowser's laugh from Super Mario 64 looped in the background while plain text box displayed on the dialogue. Mario, I have taken Princess Peach, and she will not live to see the sunrise tomorrow unless you take her place. You know what to do and where to go. Do not try to stop me unless you want her hastened to death. Then the game was going for a darker tone after I made that text box go away. I was thrust right into the gameplay. At first, I noticed that Mario's character model and his body was detailed in Super Mario Galaxy, although a little bit more realistically than proportioned. But this was a head taken from the Super Mario 64 character model. Obviously, this his design wasn't finished yet. The setting was at a sky level, and there was just some simple platforms floating in the air. The rest of the area was just a blue sky with several clouds scrolling for the background. The clouds seemed to be more realistic than the usual cartoony puffs in the Mario games. They were quite graphically impressive. There was no music or voice samples from Mario, but there was no sound effects, grunts when he jumped, but of course the jumping sound more subdued than the other Mario games. Mario didn't jump as high as he usually did, and had little over control of his movement in the air. The different types of jumps in the every 3D Mario were not present. I played through the level and there was nothing especially notable out of the gameplay. Enemies didn't seem to have been added yet. I just jumped from platform to platform, and it was very challenging. As I went through the level, I noticed some graphics gradually changing. The sky became more and more cloudy until the entire composed of the clouds, and the clouds background gradually turned that into a dark gray. After this, it started to rain when I reached a small platform with Toad on it, and it looked like the Super Mario Galaxy model. When I landed on this platform, the dialogue appeared. "We don't want you anymore, Mario. You don't belong here. Just give Bowser what he wants. Die." After the text box went away, I had no longer control over Mario. Mario just stood there for a while, then turned around and walked off the platform. His body seemed to go limp as he fell. Eventually it was revealed that he was more realistic in the modern city under the sea, and the buildings looked neglected. But there were people on the street. So Mario hit the ground with a realistic sounding thud, but he didn't explode or show any visible wounds. He just laid there. The people in the city just kept walking by, ignoring Mario, although I thought that I saw a few glances of him with cold, somewhat angry expressions. This went on for a few minutes, and eventually people stopped appearing. Mario got up and I was back in control, but I couldn't jump at all and was reduced to walking speed. The large buildings of the cities didn't appear to be interactive, so I just kept walking down the street for a while. Eventually, I found a small house that seemed to be out of place amongst the larger buildings. When I approached the door, Mario opened it, and the screen went white and black. Some text appeared. The House of Tom Memories. This appears to be a new level title. When I pressed the button, the screen then faded back to Mario, and he was inside the house than before. Everything seemed bigger than usual, but it wasn't too gigantic. It scaled off as Mario was a very small child. The house was filled with normal objects covered in dust and signs of neglect. There were also no people on the floor. It was just like broken lamps and rotting food, and I even found a door that opened to a set of stairs going down, leading to a basement. In the basement, I found a dilapidated couch and a broken TV. However, what really caught my attention was that the couch had two skeletons that appeared to be children. Judging by their size, due to the scale of the house, they were a lot larger than Mario. I was starting to get very disturbed by now. How a Mario game containing these programs to be in this extent? I went up to the skeletons and tried pressing the buttons to interact with them, or with the TV, but it seemed that nothing had happened. I was about to turn around and go elsewhere when I was nearly scared to death by a deafening loud crash coming from the game. What happened to be Bowser, who seemed to have broken through the floor from below right in front of him, and I say Mario appeared to be, was nothing like the way Bowser usually rendered. The reptilian monster in the game had Bowser's brownish yellow color green pattern, and looked far more threatening than any Bowser model that I've seen before. It was then proportioned that the Bowser I knew had his arms and legs far longer to realization to its body, and ended with his razor-sharp claws. The green shell did not look had spikes glued on. They were more jagged and organic looking, like the same dark green color like the rest of the hard shell had. The face was small, but its pure black eyes, and a mouth full of jagged teeth that looked up far more than the face would have. Mario was cowering in fear from this thing. Dialogue box appeared. "You've kept me waiting long enough, Mario. I will taste the flesh soon. You will finally surrender. Or does Peach have to die?" I still don't have any control. Mario just stood there, shivering for several seconds before nodding his head. Bowser impaled Mario with his claws, but there was no blood, but it was clear that the animation sound effects had sharp digits of Bowser's hands had gone through Mario's body. With one swift motion, Bowser dragged Mario up and began to bite him. Again, there was no blood or graphic details behind Mario, but it's just Mario's character began to get destroyed. The screen then faded to black and white. X appeared, another name appeared on the level, Mario's internal home. The Mario's character model was whole again, and when the level started, it was the only thing on the screen besides the black background. It was floating, as if it was in space. I could somewhat control it, but it felt like more I was deciding in the general direction, which Mario would stumble whenever I was fully controlling him. I drifted towards an apparent destination and voices faded in, but they were echoing and deep voices telling Mario that he was worthless. The world no longer had any use for him, and everyone would be better off if he was dead. High-pitched crying was layered into the voices a bit, and it sounded like it was supposed to be Mario's cries. This really disturbed me as I found myself fighting back tears. For some reason, I couldn't understand this was affecting me in an emotional level. His voice became aimless and wandered off for several minutes, until I spotted a light of gray that was a speck in the distance. I moved towards it, and it took a very long time to reach. Grew closer at a much slower rate than it should have. When I was close enough to make it out, I saw that it was a tombstone, a very plain one with cracks in several places. When I got right next to the tombstone, I could see writing on it. I turned off the system right after reading it. I'm not going to play the beta or hack or whatever this again. There was a single word written on the tombstone. Innocence. And that, my little pretties, was Super Mario 128. A Super Mario creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? Now, this one I would have to say oh yeah, this has been written by Kai Simpson. My final thoughts on the story? Okay, I'm a little bit mixed on this pasta. Like, I'm going to be completely honest. I am a little bit mixed on this one. The concept itself of what this story really is, it's still a pretty good, well-made story. Sitting there, seeing how, everything going out like this. It's still a pretty good pasta from, when I first read it. Now, this story, I've seen a bunch of narrations based on this story, and I have to say this story was definitely something. Like, seeing, a Mario game somebody plays and, Mario's going all over the place and it's a darker tone to a Mario game. I really have to say that's actually quite freaky. I know it's an old pasta, but I do have some things that I want to say that I really didn't care for. And I'm not trying to sound like a hypocrite in any way, shape, or form. This is just me saying, my opinion. Now, for one, this story of its own self was a bit cliched. I'm being honest. It was a bit cliched, especially when it came to, I guess, what was it? I think the one thing that it started to get a little bit weird was the fact that the story of its own self, I think it might have been, I'm not really sure, but I'm just gonna sit here and say that the story of its own self just didn't exactly really sit well. I think the one of the issues would have to be what was it? Oh yeah. More specifically, saying white text appears or something without a game file or any, save file or anything like that. There are a few cliches that are in this story, and I know that this story, it's an old one, so I'm willing to kind of give it a pass. But the story was a bit cliched of its own self, to be honest. Even if it's it's an older story, I'm kind of somewhat willing to give it a pass, but at the same time, this story just it just didn't really work well in this matter though. Like, I'm not trying to bash this story or anything. Like, this story has a pretty good context and concept to it, but of its own self, the story just didn't really, make sense at times. If you get what I'm saying, you probably understand that the story of its own self is just, it's not a terrible story or anything. It's just, well, not that great. It just didn't really, make a whole lot of sense at times. Like, I know this might be, a little bit hypocritical because this is like an older story, so I'm willing to give that one like a pass or something, but of its own self, the story just didn't work out good. Like, mainly the cliched part. Like, it wasn't really too cliched, where the story would just bring it down due to how, the story went out. No. It didn't go down like that, but the story of its own self just didn't really exactly make, like, a whole lot of sense. I think if you get what I'm saying, you probably know. Like, it's just a bit cliched in the story. Like, that's the only thing I really have to say that I wasn't crazy on, was that the fact that the whole story of its own self was just cliched a bit, especially at certain parts of the story. So I kind of was a bit hesitant to read it due to how cliched, certain parts are. Like, I'm not saying all the parts were cliched. No, not all the parts were cliched. It's just some parts of the story just didn't really, make a whole lot of sense. Seeing that Mario gets killed by Bowser, and then Mario walks up to a tombstone, and, I really don't get it why, people use tombstone cliches and, stories. That just doesn't really make sense to me. Like, why is it that a lot of people really like to use tombstones in, creepypastas? Unless there's a specific good reason for it. Like, for example, the Kirby Road one, it did have a tombstone, but at least it was being, 100% honest on why it's there in the first place, as long as at least that is portraying something believable. But I think in this matter, though, it just didn't really. The tombstone thing near the end was just unnecessary. Like, that's just what I'm seeing. But, I've read a couple of, Kai Simpson stories in the past. And, there was some of them that I did have some issues with. Like, for example, the Stickity one where the Candle Cove creepypasta, well, not the Candle Cove thing being mentioned, was unnecessary. Which, yet again, I would have to say that's definitely something else. But of its own self, the story was not terrible. It is not a terrible story. But I really feel that it just needs to be, well, I guess maybe just fixed up mainly with the how the story was and went out. So it's kind of something I'm just, wanting to point it out there for the sake of doing so. But yeah, I am going to kind of sit there and, wrap up the review. There's not really much for me to, say. But I would have to say I really do like how the creepypastas went out. I really like how, the stories went out. Went out of their way and made something, good. Like, this story was good, but I did have some mixed feelings regarding the story. And don't worry, the grammar of this story is really good. I'm not gonna lie, the grammar is pretty good in the story. It's a pretty interesting concept and all that. And there is actually, and to be honest, I really have to say Mario did have a few dark themes at times, so there's definitely that. But overall, this story didn't really made a whole lot of sense at times. But the story was not terrible. The story was not a terrible story. I really still find this one to be pretty good, although it does need a bit of improvement. Mainly with, maybe the tombstone thing could be removed, because then that way the story would be, would make a whole lot of sense, I guess. I guess you could kind of say that, but I really just wanted to get that out of the way for any of you guys who were wondering. But I guess with that being the case, I'm just gonna sit there and wrap up the review, because there's like no sense on, just rambling on for a good, another 10 minutes. But alright, I guess with that being the case, and with that being said, I'm gonna sit here and wrap up this review. So, just gonna sit here and say this right now, and like I always continue to say, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 10 out of 10. It's a pretty good story. It was very good and well made. It's definitely very enjoyable. I found this one to be a lot of fun. I really do was mixed in this, well, pasta. Like, if you heard the review, you should already know. But other than that, the story of its own self was actually, pretty interesting for the most part. It actually had a good concept going for. And the story was not terrible, so I definitely would have to say it's an interesting concept for how this story was, so there is definitely that. But I guess with that being the case, that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me now what your thoughts are down in the comments section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode, and if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload so then you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.